Can you tell us about Ben and your son, who he was as a person, any stories that you have?
Well, he was a very handsome boy, as many girls used to say. But at any rate, Ben was just a regular guy. You know, he loved beauty. And he also loved a lot of guy things, which made him a little bit unusual as a guy who might like sports and all those things, but also he loved beautiful things, and he loved beauty from a very early age and was attracted to classical music, and so he took piano lessons. He was pretty musical early on, and was a classical pianist. He was also a very funny guy, and he was also a very kind. He hated to see anybody who people picked on or were lonely or anything like that. He was always trying to reach out and trying to figure out a way to make them feel better. So he had a lot of very good friends, and he was just a wonderful guy in so many ways. Of course, I'm his parent, so.
But it sounds like so many other people thought that too.
Yeah, he had a lot of very good friends, and that compounded his death. Was very was tragic too. Any child that dies, it's tragic. I think it felt very difficult for his good friends.
How has the loss affected your relationship with your other child? How has the loss affected you and your other child and your relationship with them?
Well, our daughter Emma
is.
She was 23 at the time that her brother died suddenly, and I think it was very difficult for her, as it is for most siblings. They're mostly concerned with taking care of their parents, because when a sibling dies, you not only experience the loss of your sibling, you experience the loss of your parents emotionally. So for most parents whose child dies, they say that you only have one child, the child that died, because it takes all of your emotional energy to deal with that loss for so long. And so the sibling that's surviving is spending all of their time trying to take care of their parents, and so they don't want to trouble them, they don't want to make them upset with their own grief. And I think our daughter was fairly typical in that regard of feeling her own sense of isolation and feeling that she needed to take care of us. So there's a lot of conflicts for siblings. And sometimes being able to talk about the death doesn't come for a few years afterwards. And we can talk about it more now. But different, you know, and people are different. Some siblings after a few years can want to talk about it all the time. Others don't. You know, people are different. So I think, though, that it has been hard for her, and as time goes on, some of the things you realize is I'm the only one to take care of my parents. You know, I don't have a sibling that I can have, my children can have cousins. There's always implications and ripples that continue to happen, even it's 12 years later, are still happening now.
And how does that affect me? And what is your relationship like with her now? Is it, I mean, it's obviously changed.
Yeah, it's very close. But we've always been close. So I don't know totally, but I think that she stayed in our area. She stayed in our neighborhood. She wants to be near us. I think that may be partly because her family feels very small now, and so it's important for her to stay close. And of course, then we're close to our grandchildren too. And I think it may affect the what their decisions are about how big their family they want their family to be. Maybe bigger than you might normally think, because again, you're feeling like my family suddenly is 50% smaller if you had one sibling. So, yeah.
You've shown a lot of this artwork in different art shows around the country. Can you explain that and the process and how it feels to sort of have people see the work that you've done?
Well, let's see. Going back yet another step in the journey that I had, I think after I created this artwork, one of the feelings that I had was that I needed to connect with other people. And I realized that through my artwork I could do that, that I would feel less isolated as a grieving parent. And so I decided I would show it to anybody that wanted to see it, and make it into a portable show. And I first showed it at my synagogue, because our rabbi had been very supportive, as well as our congregation, and so I showed it, and people were very moved by it, and asked me then from there to show it other places. So it sort of grew in that way. Now I don't always carry it around with me because it's a lot of artwork, so I created a slideshow in which I could show it to at conferences and to other people if I had to go a distance.
You mentioned your husband support. Can you share how your husband was affected by the death of your son? And you sort of mentioned that he sort of let you do your own thing and sort of was supportive of the art.
Oh, yes. And my husband is a mental health therapist also. So he can talk about how he feels and does. And part of the way he dealt with this grief was by journaling and writing, which he did fairly intensely for a few years. And so we kind of supported each other and still do. That's not always the case with other parents. Sometimes one can talk about their feelings and wants to share that openly, and the other one does not at all. So some parents grieve very differently, and I know that it's very important that you respect the other person's way to grieve, because there isn't one way to do it. People do what they have to do to get through the worst and most terrible of losses that they can experience. So luckily in our situation we were both able to do that. But he's a more private person. He has no desire to talk publicly about it. I mean, he would if somebody asked him, but he doesn't have the same need to reach out as I do. So we grieve a little differently that way, but he's always supportive of anything that I want to do, and I'm very lucky that way.
And how did you start using art as a means to deal with your grief? Did it help with the healing in some way? To have an outlet for the emotional loss?
Yeah, for me, I tend to think in images, and so there's that artistic or creative side of me that tends to go toward images and visual kinds of things, and so drawing and painting, all of that has always been a part of my life, and so it seemed like I couldn't get the images out of my mind. I had to get them down on paper, and even though it was very difficult for me at times to put them down on paper, I sometimes literally could not until I was ready to put them down. So, and other ones I would put them down right away. So it was a long journey. I think sometimes people might, when they see the art, think, oh, well, you sat down and you made one piece, and then the next piece, and then the next piece, and it was an orderly progression, but it really was not like that. It was, some of them were the ones that I knew, yes, I knew early on, these are the ones that I want to put down right now. Others were in my head. I would like to put these down, but I am not emotionally ready to put them down because it was too painful for me. And some of them were put down years later. This art was created over 5 to 7 years. So we're talking about a long period of time. And so that maybe is a reflection of how long it takes for a parent to reach some kind of peace in the experience of the death of your child is a very long time. So I do want people to know that it's not just something that you sit down and kind of whip out. And the other thing was I really did this artwork very privately. At the time I made it, I had no desire to show it to anyone. I was doing it for myself. But as time went on, I realized that this is making a story, I'm still isolated with it, so I can connect with people with this. People will finally get it. They'll finally understand if they see this. But I also knew that if they saw it, it would be very painful for them. And so I always have to account for that, that this is not easy artwork to look at. It's not butterflies. It's not pleasant in any way.
Well, I think it's a good point that you bring up, because we sometimes think of grieving as a linear progression, when it rather is more, it happens as it happens. And it seems like your artwork really pervades that.
Yeah. Well, that's right.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad we could talk about that, because sometimes people don't always realize that it's not linear.
Well, I think it probably helps other people to hear. I'm sure it helps other people to hear that, because other people probably put that somewhat of a pressure on themselves. Oh, like that, they're supposed to go through the stages in a certain way.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that it's doesn't take very long. I think sometimes people think, well, a year or two, but really, in the death of your child, the first year you're just trying to absorb that this happened. The second year is usually are often worse, because then you do realize it happened and you miss your child so terribly. So it takes 2 or 3 years just to try to absorb that this is happening. I remember early on another parent who had lost a child telling me, I said, when will this get better? And they said, it'll feel a little better in 5 years. I thought, 5 years? That's longer than I went to undergraduate. I couldn't, it's really depressing when people tell you how long it's going to take. But for parents, it's the truth.
What is it like to have people come up to you and say, I can't imagine going through this? Or does that feel empathetic? Is it, does it feel like, I can understand where you couldn't understand? And how does it, does it make you feel like you're they sort of get your message? Or how does it make you feel to have people come up to you
Well,
and say
it didn't make me feel good.
Okay.
It might feel empathic to someone else, who might feel like, that's right, don't try to think that you can understand this.
Yeah.
For me, it felt distancing. I can think of one of the most empathic comments that was made to me was by a colleague who is a very empathic person, who instead of saying, I can't imagine, which is what most people say, she said, I think I can just touch a little bit of how you might be feeling. And she described a situation in which she worried that she had almost lost her child. And she attempted to try to say, I am with you in this, or I'm going to go there a little bit. And that to me is the most meaningful. So when people would say, I can't imagine, I felt like they were just like tossing it out there. And as I said in the foreword, or the introduction in the book, I once tried to say to somebody, well, I think you might be able to imagine if you thought about it for a minute, and the person got really upset and put their hand out and said, no, I can't imagine, meaning I can't go there. And that I understand that for parents, the death of your child, the possibility that you would lose your child, all parents know that, but they keep it on a little island in their psyche, way far out in an ocean, where, and you don't visit that island. And sometimes you may think about it for a minute and then go, no, we'll leave that over there, okay? Because it's too painful to bond with your child and then think about losing them. So you don't. And someone who has lost a child brings you face to face with it. And it's frightening. I remember many parents described this, when we would walk around in our neighborhood and people would like try to avoid us or look at us like, I wonder what is going on in their brain, and look at us kind of with pity on their faces, or like fear of us. And we lost a lot of friends who could not manage to hear about our emotions. And that's fairly typical too, is that you will lose friends. And we got other friends that could go there with us and tolerate it. So it changes your whole life. It's a very, very difficult subject socially.
And it seems like part of this artwork is to sort of people just not say, I can't imagine, and sort of to bring them into the world of losing a child or someone very close to you without necessarily, and sort of immerse them in it without having to overbearing them with the emotions of it in some ways.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
And if they want to see it, they can. And sometimes people can only see part of it, and they have to walk away. It is emotional for many people to see it and be absorbed in it. But it is there, and many parents and grievers of all kinds have really thanked me for being able to put out there what it is that they could not express.
And it sounds like that helps with the grievers. Does it help other people sort of understand if they're friends of a griever, sort of understand what their friends are going through? Or
Yes, very much so. Many people have commented on that they now get a better picture of what this is really like for parents, but also, for other grievers too. I mean, maybe you haven't experienced such an emotional or tragic or traumatic loss, but someone close to you has, and it's hard to talk about, it's hard to get the words that are going to make it come alive, and then they can see that in the artwork. So it's, been very helpful for others too.
You sort of talked about this, but what do you want to convey to other parents who've lost childs, or people who've experienced death, or people who know people who've experienced death?
Well, I want them to be able to see that they are understood, and that perhaps this will help with their healing, to be able to concretize some of the feelings that they have by looking at the images. And people, interestingly to me, which I find just so fascinating, people see different things in the artwork than I ever intended in creating it, because they're laying onto it their own creative process and their own imagination. And so there's things for them in there that they can create for themselves through the artwork. So I want them to also know that, yes, this is for you to be able to work through your own loss in the way that you see this. I also want them to see that maybe they can do the same thing, because I really feel that by us using our creative process, whether that's writing or whether that's visual art, and you don't have to be an artist to do it. I've done workshops with people who can't draw, but they draw those images, because I can tell you they have them in their mind. And when I say put it on paper, it really is a powerful experience. Just like writing, poetry, people do all kinds of creative kind of endeavors to express their grief, and don't be shy. Go ahead and do it. Even if you never intended to do it, to show it to anybody. You can just keep it for yourself. But I want them to know that using their imagination and their creative self is there for them just as much as it is for me. And I hope that they will be inspired to maybe try using some of those processes to help them.
That's amazing. I know a way that you took Ben's love of classical music and helping other people express is the Benjamin Carlson Burns Scholarship at the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Well, this was a couple of years after Ben died. We wanted something to remember him by. So we were thinking about what would be the best way to have a memorial to our son. And as I said, Ben cared a lot about beauty, and he was a kind person. And so one of the things he said to me when he was in junior in high school was that he didn't understand why some inner city kids that might be disadvantaged economically, why they weren't interested or knew about classical music, because he liked all kinds of music. And he wanted to be able to let them know how exciting classical music was. He wanted to expose little kids to it. So I connected him to an art center in the inner city here, and he started bringing in classical music that was the loudest and the most fun music he could think of, and playing it for the kids and getting them all excited about it. And then he said, well, Mom, now they're excited. They want to, play an instrument. So I have to teach them piano lessons, but they don't have a piano here. So then he wanted to get donated pianos to put at the art center. And then he started teaching lessons to the kids. Then he said they have to practice at home. So now I have to get them pianos in their homes. So we were driving around getting pianos, trying to shove them into third floor apartment buildings. It was quite an effort. But so it seemed like the ideal kind of project for us to remember Ben would be to start a fund in which we would match kids that could not afford lessons, that had interest in classical music, with very high quality teachers, and pay for those lessons for those kids. So we started out with one student in 2004, and today we support 16 students through the symphony orchestra, although it is entirely donor funded. The other thing we wanted to do was we didn't want to start with a child and then say, oh, well, we have enough for 1 year of lessons and that's it. We wanted a long-term mentoring relationship for these kids. So when we accept a kid into the Ben Carlson Burns Scholarship, we have to have enough money already in the fund to support them until they graduate from high school. So if we take a 7th grader, we have to have 5 years of money in there already. So if, like, the scholarship ended next year, those kids would already be covered all the way through until they graduate. The other unique aspect that I know Ben would like is that it is not talent-based. We have very, very talented kids. We have kids in a whole spectrum, kids that just want to do this because they enjoy it, all the way up to very talented. So you only have to have an interest in classical music and want to take those lessons and be, enjoy it. And it's amazing the amount of growth that these kids have had. Every year we have a recital and they do just wonderful things. So we're thrilled with it, and it's really a living legacy.
Thank you so much. Is there anything you want to add or share?
Well, I think I'd like to let your listeners know that since this is a site that has to do with disabilities, grief is a normal and natural process that we all have. But it can be a very disabling process. And that is important for us all to know, is that, grief can really bring you down. And it's a long process, and you have to work your way back from that. And it can change you. It can change you for the worse, or it can change you for the better. But you have to face grief in order to get through it. And so you're kind of temporarily wounded, and sometimes you're wounded in a permanent way, and you feel like you have a disability in a sense, because you've experienced a permanent loss of some kind. But just like any disability, it does shape who you are in the future, but it can also make you a better person, and a more understanding person, a wiser person. And I do believe that my experience has made me that kind of person. So I hope that that's an inspiration to your listeners as well.
Thank you. I mean, it's definitely inspirational just hearing you and being an advocate for a topic that doesn't always get talked about, and really fleshing it out and bringing out good points. So thank you so much for coming here.
Oh, you're welcome.